Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Hello, Merryn Talks Money listeners. We are recording an episode of Merryn Talks Money in front of an audience the morning after Rachel Reeves' UK budget. I want you to join us for croissants and conversation. We've got Helen Thomas of Blonde Money as one of our guests. We've also got John Stepek. You're going to love it. Well, you might not love it because it'll be right after the budget, but you'll find it interesting at the very least. Find the registration link in the show notes. Space is limited, always limited, so sign up soon. Now, on to today's show, which may well cover some of those very same topics. Welcome to Merryn Talks Money, the podcast in which people who know the markets explain the markets. This week, I am speaking with Arthur Laffer. Arthur is an American economist famous for his work on supply-side economics and the invention of the Laffer Curve. We'll come back to that, actually, because it's not really the invention of the concept, it's the invention of the curve, isn't it? So we'll come back to that. This illustrates the relationship between tax rates and government revenue. In the late 70s, he founded Laffer Associates as an economic research and consulting firm, as well as Laffer Investments, an investment management firm. We might come back to that too. Recently, Art has co-authored a book called Prosperity Through Growth, Boosting Living Standards in an Age of Autocracy and AI. This is a primer for reviving the UK economy. Not everyone agrees with that, by the way, but I think I do. We're going to talk about the ideas that he and his co-authors put forward in that book, and we're going to get his take on the UK economy and the US economy as well. Arthur, welcome to Merryn Talks Money.
Thank you very much.
Let's go on to defining the Laffer Curve. So this idea that there is a relationship between tax rates and the amount that you raise, and there is a point at which you have put up a tax rate by too much and revenue will then start to fall. That's an idea that has been discussed, for thousands of years because It is absolutely obvious, right? Or it seems obvious to me. But what you did was you drew a curve that gives us more of a sense of how it really works.
More than that, but in the 60s and 70s, they were literally looking at no relationship. If you raise tax rates by 10%, revenues would rise by 10%. Now, everyone knows, they didn't know it then, they really didn't, and they just used that everywhere. So they were always overestimating revenues for tax increases and underestimating revenues for tax declines. And that's true. It's been around forever, though, as you say. It's in the Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. By the way, I also didn't name it the Laffer Curve. That was Jude Wanniski of the Wall Street Journal who did. And again, I love the name. I just love it, and I'm going to keep it myself.
Look at this modesty. You didn't name your own curve.
Yeah, I know. But I'm trying to get some sort of victimhood there so you feel sorry for me in the days that follow. But if you look at it, it's really important, the relationship between tax rates and total revenues. A lot of things come between those two. Now, it's true, when you raise tax rates, you do increase the amount of revenue per dollar of tax base. That's true. But it's also true that when you raise tax rates on a tax base, you cause that tax base to be less attractive and you shrink the tax base. Now, you may shrink it because people work less hard, because they invest less, but you also shrink it because people move offshore, because people change the composition of their income, the volume of their income, the timing of their income, and also they use tax shelters, Merryn. And that's probably the biggest slip twixt the cup and the lip here between tax rates and total revenues. And that's why it's such a powerful concept, especially today. When Gordon Brown raised your tax rate in Britain from 40p to 50p, revenues actually fell. The economy, people left the country, they fell and all that. And that was a classic case of the Laffer Curve.
Let's stick with that for a moment, because that looked like clear evidence that the Laffer Curve. We say it's common sense, not everyone believes it. I'm holding up the book for the purpose of the video. Everyone go buy the book. One of the things that you say in the beginning of this is that these aren't opinions. That Laffer Curve is not an opinion. It's a provable truth. Right? So you have tens and tens of years worth of American tax data, which you can use in a very granular way to show that it's not an opinion, it's a reality.
Thank you. That's true. It's exactly true. And no one should care about your opinion or my opinion. This is about facts, not how we feel. What happens when you raise tax rates on the rich? We know what happens. Now, this is from my prior book of 2.5 years ago, Taxes Have Consequences, which is the entire history of the U.S. income tax. We have every single tax return for every year, okay? And every single time we raise the highest tax rate on the top 1% of income earners, three things happened. The economy underperformed, tax revenues from the rich, from the top 1%, dropped. They fell, not rose, and the poor got hammered. Every time we've cut tax rates on the rich, the economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone up, and the poor have found jobs, output, employment, production, and had their lives improved. So those are the facts. And I go through it with the states as well in the opening section of the book here. It's just blasts at you, Merryn. It is facts, and it is facts in Britain. It's in facts in all these other countries. It's just shocking, and yet politicians invariably ignore it because they want a virtue signal rather than do what's good for the poor. If you want to help the poor create growth, that's the answer.
Okay, but one of the reasons why politicians are able to ignore it and pretend that it doesn't exist is because it's imprecise. You can't say the Laffer Curve proves to us that income tax at this level is the correct level. This is the correct level, and above this, that this happens, and below it, that happens. And there is also a sense that it shifts, right? Depending on politics, depending on whether it's wartime or peacetime, depending on how people feel, depending on vibes, right? It could shift around with that. While it's a very clear idea, it's hard to make it precise enough to persuade a politician to be clear on it.
I don't think you're right on that. I really don't. You're correct. All of those statements you say are true, but they aren't materially very true. Now, it's true, the smaller the tax base, the more likely it is that you're in the prohibitive range of the Laffer Curve. The longer you're willing to wait, the more likely it is you're in the Laffer Curve. The elasticities do change to respond to this. That's all true, but we have very precise measures of how these effects are. Now, all of these other effects undoubtedly do impact it, but they don't change the direction, Merryn.
No, I didn't mean that. I just mean that it's hard to say 32% is the correct rate for income tax.
But raising it, let's take Rachel Reeves. Let's take Rachel Reeves right now. Let's talk about her tax increase. Now, I have not seen the budget, so I don't know if she did, but I assume she's going to raise taxes in her budget. I assume that's going to be the case. We know that's the wrong thing to do in Britain. We know that with perfect certainty. Britain has been declining in its growth. Britain's declining in its revenues. It's been declining in its ability to provide a good living for the poor, the minority, the disenfranchised. We know all of that, and we know it's because of the disincentives, in part, of the tax codes, of regulatory policy, of monetary policy, and of trade policy, and yet she goes and does the wrong thing, period, and they all cheer and whoop as they pass it through. And it's not just the Labour Party, it's the Conservative Party too, by the way. You can go back and look at them. You can look at all these others. They want a virtue signal. I'm for the poor. I'm going to raise tax on the rich. Yeah, that's the elephant in the living room. If you want to help the poor, you've got to create job opportunities and economic growth so they can earn income. And they all know that. The numbers all show that. And yet they go the wrong direction. And by the way, it's no different here, except for Trump. Trump has been very good on this, but Biden and all these people, I mean, they're just crazy. They're going against all data and against all logic, and they push the thing and then stand on stage and, I'm here for the poor. And it's this posturing that really bothers me.
It does slightly feel, doesn't it, as though for some time now the tax system in the UK has been used less as a revenue raiser than a virtue signaler.
Exactly, that's exactly true. Thank you. And it's wrong. It's just wrong because these are real people, Merryn. They're people with children and lives and happiness. You're destroying their futures. You're ruining a whole generation of people who are just like you and me and have hopes and aspirations. Every single Brit I know loves the national lottery. They all want to be rich. And the greatest way of being rich is not having a lottery, for God's sakes. It's cutting tax rates and allow them to fly with their own wings and with their own skills. But no, they don't do that. But then they provide the lottery to give the people who don't work hard the chance to become super rich. But they all want to be rich. And yet the government hates the rich and their policies.
It'd be much better for everyone to be better off than a couple of people to be super rich.
Thank you.
Right?
You're exactly
the lottery
right.
doesn't work for us. Now, so let's go back a little. So let's pretend our country was not the mess up that it is, and we were starting from scratch with the tax system.
Yes.
What we want, presumably, is a very broad-based, reasonably flat tax system.
Totally
is
flat.
That right? And
Totally
where,
flat.
if we were looking only at income tax, where would you pitch it?
What I would do is I'd have the lowest possible tax rate on the broadest possible tax base. The reason for that is the lowest rate is so you provide people with the least incentives to evade, avoid, or otherwise not report taxable income. And you have the broadest base with the least deductions, exemptions, exclusions, or credits, write-offs, whatever those things are, loopholes, so that they don't have easy places to go into to avoid paying taxation. Now, I did Jerry Brown's flat tax here in the U.S. a long while ago, and the number we came out with a static revenue flat tax, it came out to about 11.8% if you got rid of all federal taxes. and replace them with two flat rate taxes, one on business net sales, that's your VAT, and one on personal unadjusted gross income. Those two taxes, that's it, no other taxes, starting with the first dollar to the last dollar. It came out 11.8%. I rounded it up for Jerry to 12 just to make sure, and he was scared because politicians don't understand all this stuff. He rounded it up to 13%. And we could replace every tax, every federal tax in the U.S. with that. Every single one, Merryn. Can you imagine what the economy would look like? No one would have to file a tax return. If you earn $100, the company sends in $13 into the treasury, gives you $87. That's it. Bang, no, you don't even have file returns or anything. There are no lawyers, no accountants, nor deferred income specialists. There are no tax dodges. There are no loopholes. There are no schemes. All of that stuff just disappears. I mean, it's just amazing how high we could fly with those wings. It would just be great.
Arthur, now, any accountant listening to this, any tax specialist, most of the legal profession, they're listening to you and they're going, please, no, don't do this to us. Imagine the unemployment. Yeah. Because you're not just talking about a low tax system, you're talking about a simple tax system. And there's an awful lot of people who don't want a simple tax system. For a tax code that's longer than the complete works of Shakespeare, that works for them.
Yeah. Let me also, it's just like all those people who love COVID-19, the undertakers, the morticians, the people who ran hospitals, they love COVID-19. Even though it killed lots and lots and lots of people, they loved it because it provided them with jobs, output, employment. By the way, they can go straight to Hades, if you forgive my French, and they can get good jobs that create wealth rather than good jobs to dodge immoral government policies. I just cannot allow myself to be swayed by people who do makeshift projects that don't help the world. Forgive me for that.
So how do we get an economy like that of the UK?
I think the UK...
Here we are. This is a disaster on every single level. As you say, we've barely grown, not just since the financial crisis, but actually since several years before the financial crisis. We have got every single kingdom that you suggest. The book, by the way, everyone talks about the 5 kingdoms of growth. And there's taxation, government spending, monetary policy, regulatory policy, trade policy. All of these are wrong. And I would add to that, by the way, Arthur, if you didn't mind me adding a kingdom, I would add energy policy because of cheap energy. It's,
that could be energy.
Drivers of growth. I would add a 6 to that. So, you know, we have all those. We've done them all wrong. We've got this appalling deficit, unbelievably awful level of public debt, a level of taxation that is already, I would say, very clearly on the wrong side of your curve. We have a budget coming up where we have rumors all over the place that she's going to break every manifesto promise under the sun, add 2p to the basic rate of income tax, 5p to the top rate of tax. We hear all these kinds of things. This is going in the wrong direction. How on earth do you get an economy in a state like this to a position where it can conceivably introduce a low, flat, broad-based rate of tax?
Yeah, I don't want to be hypothetical.
The transition feels like hell.
Transitions are not bad. They are not. They're really good. They're really easy. But let me just say this. I worked with one of your prime ministers very closely, a young lady named Margaret Thatcher. From 1970 on through the whole term there. She dropped the highest tax rate. Now, I'm obviously picking and choosing and cherry picking, but 98% on the income, dropped it down to 40%. You can see what happened during there. We moved towards it. A North Star that you describe is something to guide us the direction we should be moving there. Now, with the U.S., with Ronald Reagan, we cut the highest marginal income tax rate from 70% to 20%, to 28%, excuse me. We cut the corporate rate from 46% to 34%. We went from 14 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets. We got rid of all the deductions, exemptions, exclusions. So it was revenue neutral, Merryn. Now, what we've done here, what I would like to see done in Britain is you can make these tax codes revenue neutral. So there is no fear of losing revenues. And all you have is upside. Now, this is really a very easy way to do it within the states here because we have so many deductions, exemptions. If you get rid of those and lower the rates, you can do it so that the static revenue is the same, but you now have all the incentives working in the right direction. And Britain can do that too. It really can. And then once it starts, Merryn, once the growth model starts, it hits the wind at your back. It's like Thatcher. It's like Reagan. Once you start, then they start doing all these things. They privatized all these companies. They sold them off. They deregulated. They had the trade policy, the inflation. All of that happens, and it's a virtuous cycle rather than a death spiral. And that, I think, is what Britain can do if they get the right person. It happened with Thatcher. It's happened with Reagan. It happened with Kennedy. We've had 4 or 5 episodes in the U.S. where it really happened. It lasts only for a generation, but hell, I'm 85. I'll take a generation.
Lasts for a generation because they forget, you mean?
Yeah, they do. They forget, and then they start virtue signaling again. There's nothing wrong with being rich. There is something very wrong with being poor. People who are poor need to have their opportunities increased. They need to become rich. They need to have more income. Rich people are fine. Poor people need to have the opportunities provided to them. And that's why I did enterprise zones, which I did in the 70s here. And I did it, and Reagan put it through. Reagan and Jack Kemp did, where we have tax-free zones in the inner cities, where these people are the poorest of all. So they have no income tax, no VAT tax, nothing in the inner city. You have to live there in your primary residence and also work there, and no income tax and no VAT. And you can imagine how the jobs would be created, and these people would be able to earn their way into prosperity, which is what everyone wants. No one wants handouts, Merryn. They really don't. They'll take them because they have to. But it's much better to earn an income. I mean, Jack Kennedy put it so well. He said the best form of welfare is still a good, high-paying job. And jobs are created because of returns on capital and returns on labor. That's all.
Yeah, but you do have an incentive problem with welfare systems across
Terribly
the West.
bad. It's called welfare
where very
trap.
often you can earn as much on welfare as you can earn in a job because we have an oversupply of low-paying jobs.
You do not need to interview you. I would interview you and get your point, because you're exactly right on all this. And it's so damned obvious, Merryn. It's so damned obvious, yet these people avoid it like the plague. And they claim it's going to be catastrophic, the cut in welfare pay. My foot, it will be. Getting rid of this because you create jobs is not going to hurt you at all. Everyone will be better off. The poor, the rich, the middle, all the left, the right, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, up, down. Everyone will be better off. A rising tide, it raises all boats.
Now, the pushback you would get in the UK from pretty much every politician would be, okay, but Liz Truss. Okay, but bond markets.
Let's talk about Liz Truss.
They'll look at the next budget and they'll say, if she does not put up taxes very significantly, which I think you would say is obviously a terrible idea because it just makes the economy even worse, makes growth even lower, makes it even harder to pay back the debt. But what most people would say is if she doesn't put up taxes, 40, 50, 60 billion, whatever it is, the bond market will punish the UK and then our interest bill goes up and then we're in even more trouble than we were before and hello fiscal crisis.
Can I respond to that if I could?
Absolutely.
First place, she never got a policy and she was thrown out so quickly before even she and Kwasi could get a chance to put it in and all that. My telling you this, and I know you won't believe me, and I know they don't believe me, if her policies had been put in, she would have increased tax revenues enormously.
But isn't the key point that she didn't have time?
Rachel Reeves
if Rachel Reeves were to follow your advice, she may also not be given the time.
Yeah, she might. I don't think it will take time for the effects to occur, to be honest with you. These people are waiting. They're moving out of Britain all over the place. You're in Abu Dhabi. You find Brits all over the world except in Britain. And the thing about Liz Truss is she didn't prepare the environment. I don't think. Now, I'm talking politics now where I'm really ignorant. But she didn't prepare the groundwork to get it there, to get it so that you could go to each of these different groups and get buy-in on their part. Now, with us at the U.S., with Reagan and with Trump, we got all these different groups to get buy-in. For example, in the one where we dropped the highest tax rate from 50% to 28%, we raised the lowest rate from 12.5% to 15%. We cut the corporate rate from 46% to 34%. We did all the deductions. When we did all the lobbying with all the groups, we passed that bill in the Senate in the U.S. by a vote of 97-3. Now, let me say that again. Every commie in the U.S. Senate voted for it, except for 3 of them. That was Simon in Illinois, Levin in Michigan, and Merkel in Montana. But Teddy Kennedy voted for it. Tall and Pink, Bill Bradley voted. Joe Biden voted for it. Al Gore voted for it. All these guys voted because they were primed as to how it would work. They love America. They love good budgets. And it was passed 97-3. If you do your groundwork well politically, you go through and explain it, and you go through the numbers with all these people. They're not dumb. They're smart. But build up this consensus and then put the bill in and make them co-authors. It's amazing how far you can go if you give other people credit.
Yeah, let people put their name on stuff.
Let them put their names on it. And that's what Liz Truss did not do. And she called it the blob and
It's
all
not
this
built a
other sort of stuff. And
consensus.
the blob doesn't make blob people feel good about their role in life. You know what I'm saying? No American is ever made better off by pulling a fellow American down. Every
No.
American is made better off if any one of us is made better off. This is not rich versus poor, black versus white, old versus young, male versus female. Hate never wins. Love always wins. These tax codes should be tax codes that the rich think are right and that the poor think are right. Merryn, if you make 10 times as much as I do, you should pay 10 times as much in taxes as I do, but not 1,000 times as much.
Yes.
And once you start exploiting one group and making it class warfare, you're done. It's cooked, it's fried, it's baked, it'll never work, and you've got hateful people all over the place. And I'm sick and tired of hate.
Now, Arthur, let me take this from the other side. We've spent a lot of time so far talking about taxes which are too high, that are on the wrong side of the curve. Are there any taxes that you look at that you think, actually, we could get these a bit higher? These are too low. I'm thinking specifically of land taxes. There's quite a big lobby group in the UK, and I know there is in the US as well, for the land value tax, for Georgism. Is there anything that you can see a type of tax that could go up rather than down and still raise more revenue?
When I was over there last week, one of the podcasts asked me, if you were Rachel Reeves and you had the choice of doing little bitty taxes all over the place or raising the principal, what would you do? Why, if you forced me to that choice, I'd raise one of the three primary taxes.
Yeah.
All right. When it came at Laffer's in favor of raising one of the three primary taxes, which is not quite the correct thing.
I'm not going to use that headline. I'm not going to use that headline. I'm just interested in looking at the bottom of the curve rather than at the top.
I would get rid of all of your little diddly taxes and put them all into the two taxes there, is what I'd do. I'd get rid of all these little squirrely taxes, all of this, that, and the other thing. Have people focus on doing business and paying tax once and for all and having it collected by the government directly from the companies. That's the way I'd go about it. I think land taxes are really bad. There are three types of taxes that for this discussion. One are income, sales, and value-added taxes. There's total GDP. Then there's what we call turnover taxes, which are on transactions. And then there are wealth taxes. For every 1% transactions tax is equivalent to about a 4% on the income taxes or the broad-based tax. And every 1% on a wealth tax is equivalent to 3.5% on the transaction tax, or 12 or 13 of the others. Wealth taxes are extraordinarily bad because the value of the asset falls and the people are all poor. In property taxes here, every 1% increase in the property tax rate, all right, reduces property values by about 12.5%. Now, that's getting big. So if you have 2, 3, 4% property taxes, you're really dropping the value of assets. And then it doesn't work. I think your tax system on property is probably better than ours by a substantial amount. But I'd get rid of all these little diddly things all over the place. Just clean that. Get your leaf blower and blow them all out of here. Put them in the garbage.
See, Arthur, you're demanding a level of honesty and straightforwardness and lack of complication in fight on tax system that I do not think our politicians are anywhere near.
But you and I working together,
begin to look at little and do.
But we can get it. And we've gotten it in a lot of other countries. We did it in Argentina under Menem, and maybe we'll do it under Malay. I've been down there a couple times. I love it. Yeah. I think there's a chance. We did it in Chile back in the 70s with Sergio de Castro and Ralph Luter's Pinochet period. Yes, it wasn't democratic, but we got it. The best economy in South America for 35 years. Really amazing. Under Thatcher, we did it pretty well. We did it under Reagan, and we're doing it under Trump. Come join the club. Let's have a big dance hall together, and all of us love each other, and lower taxes, and all of us become rich together. That's what the dream is.
I'm beginning to feel like I'm in the microwave. Look, let's look at some of the other things. So the next thing we get to, you've got these groups that we were talking about earlier. UK government spending. I don't think we need to talk about that at length. We can just agree that maybe there should be less of it.
Yes, I think we could just agree on that.
And then we can look at UK regulatory policy, regulation. I think, again, we can probably just agree. Could we have less of it?
I'm with you 100%.
And then UK monetary policy, perhaps we can just agree on that. It could be less awful.
It could be less awful, but it needs to be less awful. Britain is not a country like the U.S. or like some of these others. Britain has to worry about its trade accounts, and it has to worry about monetization and currency boards to do it. It's much more subject to the vagaries of the world economy than is the U.S. We are the big elephant. Britain's not as big an elephant. It's like Argentina thinking they can have their own separate currency. They can't. Now, Britain is much better than that. But Britain needs to be very careful to make sure they get things like stable coins. If you like the crypto world, I would suggest that Britain try to put in something like stable coins in the British pound and make it to the dollar or to the pound. And they could do this like Tether and some of these others, that they could really take advantage of the monetary policy of cryptocurrencies and circumvent all this political garbage out of the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve. Excuse me, it's not just you. We are equally as guilty in that as you are, but you're guilty too.
What do you mean by political garbage?
Well, the Bank of England should not be independent. Who gets blamed for inflation in Britain? The government does, not the Bank of England. And so they're not held responsible for the things they cause. And you always want to align authority with responsibility with accountability. And they don't in Britain. It's just not right. Now, the government...
But that's the case across the world, right? The central banks are remarkably undemocratic organizations that they put in place policies that shift wealth around the place, are effectively fiscal policies in the end rather than monetary policies.
And they're not accountable.
And not accountable in any way for this.
And you're right. And you're right. Again, you're the expert on this one. Not only do you see it, I think you're lecturing me on it being correct.
I reckon I should get that Nobel Prize.
Yeah, you can have the one I don't have. How about that one?
Excellent.
There
Perfect.
you go.
Right, listen. Okay, so that's monetary policy out of the way.
Let's go to the big one in the living room.
Perfect. And we agreed on energy policy, make it cheaper.
Yes.
So that takes us to trade policy.
Yes, it does.
Now, this is an interesting. You are a big believer in free trade.
Yes.
And I think that you also believe that Trump is a big believer in free trade.
I do.
And what we have here is effectively a negotiation.
Yes.
His tariff policy
100%.
is a negotiation to bring us to a much less mercantilist world.
Yes.
Over maybe a 4 or 5 year period. Is that right?
100%. You've got every word of my thoughts completely encapsulated in that conversation.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Are there limits to free trade? If we look back over the last decade, when we live in a world that we always talked about it being a globalized world of free trade, and of course it was nothing of the sort, because some economies were running a mercantilist policy, a very self-interested policy, and other economies, such as, say, for example, the UK and the US, were running what they believed to be real free trade policies, and that, of course, has led to serious disadvantages for the economies that were operating actual free trade policies.
Yeah.
How do we work our way through that?
The North Star is free trade, moving in that direction, right? But no matter how much I believe in free trade, I would not sell nuclear weapons to Kim Jong-un. I'm just not going to do it. All right? There's a limit right there. Now, that's obviously extreme. There are all sorts of things that you want to do in oil reserves, this type of stuff. But the market would do a lot better job on these arbitrage conditions in the supply chains than the government does. And I really mean that. For example, we have huge amounts of gold and silver in Fort Knox. What the hell's it doing there? It's sitting there and everyone goes, ooh. Government, when it tries to interfere in free trade, except in the extreme examples of Kim Jong-un and that stuff, does not do a good job. If you need inventories for critical materials and stuff, private sector can do those inventories better. They know how to do the calculations better than government does. So when you see a problem on trade, and we all see lots of problems on trade. We all do. When you see a problem, the question to ask is not, oh my God, there's a private sector problem, let's put the government. The question is, would the government solution to this problem be better or worse than the private error being made right now? That's the right question. And in some cases, of course, you're right. When you look at it, if I could break free trade and get Russia and Ukraine to agree on a peace plan, I do it every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I am so happy with the results in the Middle East with Gaza. It was horrible what was going on there. I think Trump did a great job in Africa with the 3 wars he stopped. The Pakistan, Afghanistan, and he did it all with trade. All of it with trade. That's the brilliance of Donald Trump's negotiation. Now, is it all moving it towards free trade? No, it isn't. But if it's moving war, God, I'd do that. Ronald Reagan did the same thing with Gorbachev. We invited them in. It was called Peace Through Strength. Invited them into our prosperity. But if you don't come in, we got a big stick here. We're going to hit you in the head. And that stuff works. And I do understand not going always at all times in every which way free trade. Negotiations for peace, etc., is also a very important characteristic of trade negotiations. And I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm a wuss, Merryn. I'm 85. When I see negotiations going on, I get all scared. I start crying. I wet myself. I climb and roll in a fetal position. I climb under my bed and cry. Donald Trump does not. Ronald Reagan did not. They didn't do that. They really went at it, and they were successful. We got world peace under Reagan with Gorbachev and Kosygin and Brezhnev and all that. And it lasted for a long time. And I think Trump's going to do the same thing. And so I am much less harsh on my criticism of Trump for violating free trade and peanut butter oil, because he's really using the trade issues very, very effectively to get a lot of other objectives we need desperately in this world. So I support him 100% so far in what he's done.
What would you criticize him for so far?
Oh, he's a human. And let me just say it this way. You got to treat Donald Trump seriously, but not literally. And some of the grandiose things he says and does are not my style. He's much more like my godfather was, who was Reagan's top friend in California, head of the kitchen cabinet, blah, blah, blah. Donald Trump is a CEO, and he's a great CEO. Sometimes he creates unnecessary hostilities by his conversation, but bottom line, I think he's just doing a great job. If he yelled at me, I would cry, but I wouldn't stop loving his policies and what he does. And
passing, though, isn't it? And we're already getting well into his second term. What happens next?
I don't know. I'm 85. I don't give a damn, to be honest. No, I do.
You so do. You so do.
I do. I think that once these get locked into stone, once he gets through his first year, which will be in another, 4 months, something like that, then we got 3 years left. He's got another almost year of control of all the House and Senate. And he controls the Supreme Court, he controls the state legislatures mostly, and governorships, and he will by then have the Fed under control, he'll have his own chairman in there, and we'll be able to lock these things into stone, so it's very difficult to undo them. But believe me, when I'm coming up to my 120th birthday, Merryn, when I come up there, I expect to see a whole new set of problems that will have to re-educate the world, again, on supply-side economics, but it works. And economics is all about incentives, and the government can change the attractiveness of activities. And if you tax people who work and you pay people who don't work, don't be surprised if a lot of people stop working. What you need to do to create a prosperous, well-functioning society is reward things that are good. We tax speeders on the freeway to get them to stop speeding. We tax smoking to get them to stop smoking. In the same breath, why do we tax people who earn income? Why do we tax people who employ other people? Why do we tax businesses that make wonderful products at low cost and make lots of profits? We don't tax them to get them to stop earning income or stop employing other people or stop making great products. But don't think for a second that those same consequences don't occur because our motive is different. That's just crazy stuff. And it goes with regulation, spending, it goes with taxes, it goes with trade, it goes with everything. And it also goes with energy policy, and it goes with privatization of industries.
You are such an optimistic man, and I appreciate that.
I'm very optimistic. We're winning, and we're going to really win.
Okay, all right, and hopefully that will happen to the UK as well. Though
maybe
not in November. I think we have to go a little lower before we can.
That's probably
we've got to scrape the bottom before we can start to come up again.
But you need to be prepared. Because you're going to make a lot of money.
But listen,
a lot of fun.
So we've talked a lot on the podcast over the last couple of months about the debasement trade, about the general collapse of fiat money and how the endless public debts mean that you can't really trust money anymore, can't trust fiat money, and hence we saw the gold price rise and rise. And you've talked about crypto already. Where do you stand on that? You got a lot of gold sitting in your portfolio?
No, of course I don't. I don't have any crypto either. But what I do is...
I have crypto.
I don't. Currency holdings is a long-term investment. If you look at Bitcoin or some of these other, they are a good store of value, but they've had a huge rise, and so has gold. But when you look at my portfolio is for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, that's where I'm at. When I look at the world at large, I see cryptocurrencies as being a private solution to a government problem. They are trying to circumvent the bad currencies that have been put into place since 1913 and going to drive them out. What we should do is have a government that welcomes a private solution to a bad public problem, and that's a bad currency. The pound is terrible. It's gotten so bad. Merryn, that they're now calling it the ounce in other countries. You don't mind my joke. Sorry. Jeez, I thought it'd be really good.
It is quite good. It just took me a beat to get it, but I got it now. My audience are cleverer than me. They'll get it much more quickly.
Well, when you look at all these currencies, I think these cryptocurrencies, especially the stable coins, are going to replace the currencies. So it's a private solution to a government problem. Do you know what blockchain does to transactions cost? When you send a check, give someone a check, they send it into the bank. It takes 7 days to clear.
We don't do that in Europe anymore. That's only in the US. None of us have seen a check in a decade.
Oh, when you use a credit card, same thing. They go beep, you can pull your card out. It's all clearing. It's all the double payment problem. Blockchain takes care of that instantaneously. I'm on the board of this one company called Soulmate, which deals with Solana. And it's a phenomenal thing. We can do 40,000 transactions in a second. Bingo! You don't need banks. You don't need any of this other stuff. You don't need
energy.
Credit. You just need the crypto, and you just go in there and do it. You can do it in secrecy because you know of all the code breaking that you can keep it. It's just wonderful stuff. And the government should allow it to come in and replace the pound, replace the dollar, and put us on a very stable valued currency for eternity. Why not?
So with your long-term confidence in the US, your long-term confidence in everybody and everything,
I love humans, by the way. I really do.
Very gratifying. Me too. With that confidence, then your long-term portfolio for your grandchildren is 100% in US equities.
It's 100% in equities, not all US, but a lot of them are. But I like a little bit down there in Argentina. I think some other stuff in the world is cool. I've got a mining company stock, which is gold, and it's also Bitcoin, but I've had it for a while, but it's in Africa. So I have some fun stuff in there. And I think I do those just because I'm excited by them. I'm on a lot of boards, and I love being on the boards because I learned so much about this modern world. I'm not modern. Do you speak any German, Merryn?
I don't know some of the languages, but no German. Willing to learn.
Ich bin nicht von gestern, ich bin von vorgestern. I'm not from yesterday, I'm from the day before yesterday. I'm in the ancient kingdoms of the Goths, or whatever it may be. I love modernity, the technology that's coming through, immunology, all the physics that's going through. Oh, but much more than AI, the genetic stuff, the CRISPR, all of that stuff. I'm really into this stuff big time. And it's just such a wonderful world that we're looking out at. All these problems that have befallen humanity and animal kingdom for 4+ billion years, we're solving. My daughter, I can tell you about my daughter, my number 4. She lives in Britain. She's a British subject, and she got metastatic melanoma 4th stage. They claimed that she had 16 weeks left to live. After I stopped crying, we went to work on this. Her roommate at Yale was head of Wisconsin's medical. I also used a Justin Stebbing in London, who's world's expert. I went down to Houston Anderson hospital there. We found this immunotherapy and that Jimmy Carter had used and brought him back out of hospice. That gave it to her. The tumors are all stopped growing. They're all killed. Now she has 7 lesions in her back. They had to have surgeons remove it, but she's alive because of immunotherapy. Amazing. How? And they didn't have to cut her all up and do. Tell me, it doesn't make you really optimistic about this world?
No, it does. I have a similar story about my father. Amazing. I was going to ask you, Arthur, at the end of this interview, what it was that kept you so optimistic and energetic, but I think we already have the answer to that one.
Yeah, and immortality is this. Having offspring is the second best thing next to immortality. And I'm so proud and so pleased with my kids, and I just love life. The older I get, the more I love life. And I'm not afraid of dying. I know it's going to happen one of these days, but I figured out how I want to die, Merryn. I want to die the exact same way my uncle did, peacefully in his sleep, not like the 3 passengers in the car he was driving.
Oh, very good.
Thank you. I have to have a little humor.
I'm definitely giving that one in.
You don't mind me having a little humor with you guys, but it's a deadly serious topic that you're doing, but humor is always important to let it get through. I'm no one's enemy. I know I get all sorts of hate mail and all this stuff, but I'm no one's enemy. I'm just sitting here. If you don't like my advice, throw me out. I've had a lot of experience. I've been going to the Oval Office now for 55 years. I've gone through all of this stuff. If I have anything of any experience that would make you guys better off, it's yours for the taking. And if you don't like what I say, I'll go home. I'll sit out there on the farm. I'll drink my bourbon and forget about all you people.
Has anyone ever contacted you from the Scottish government to ask you your views on things?
Yes, they did several times. And I'm Scots, Irish, German, like all of us in Appalachia. I'm 50-50. I'm not. I'm much more German, but my kids are all 50-50. Presbyterian, Scots, Irish, and German. That's Appalachia. And they did. And I was, what were the people? The lady fish and the lady salmon. Do you remember those? And they came to my office and we talked. And I had been advising the Irish government on the tax cuts at the time. And when they found that, they were offended by it and left. And you can see how well they've done. They've done a horrible job in my home country. My grandfather, we're all from the Ulster Union, Belfast, and Dalwhinnie area is where we're from there. And of course, we're from Königsberg in Germany and West Prussia as well. It's a shame what's happening in Scotland. Gordon Brown's about as dour as they get, and he's a cheerful fellow in Scotland. Just joking.
You know, I'm in Scotland at the moment while we're speaking.
Oh, where are you?
I'm in Edinburgh.
Do you know Brechin? Brechin,
I know who?
Brechin.
Yes, of course I do. Just up there. I mean, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away.
Yeah,
I've got very good friends who live there.
Up the Glen there, up to Brechin, and I was married in the church there up in Edsel, up the Tanty Road, as they say there. I know
that church.
Well, I was married there in 1963, and my first wife was Scottish, Highlander. We had 4 kids. Then we got divorced, drifted apart, and then we got divorced. I raised the 4 kids, and then we got 2 more kids. And
got another 2.
It's all
fantastic.
So I know Scotland.
One man war against the fertility crisis.
Yeah, Scotland is such a wonderful place. The people are so wonderful, but there's a reason why they populated the rest of the world, because they were getting the hell out of Scotland, and that's unfortunately the truth. And Scotland needs to welcome its citizens by providing them with opportunities, and that just doesn't seem to be in the cards right now.
I don't want to end on that note of misery.
No, can I tell you one story?
Yes.
Okay, now this is pretty close to being literally true. About every 7 days in a year, on average, there's a country that celebrates its independence from Britain. Now think of that. Now that statement says 2 things. Number one, it says how Britain has lost all this stuff, but it also says how much Britain once had. And we can reverse that flow in terms of prosperity. I am never been more excited about a country becoming prosperous and reclaiming its authenticity, its authorship of the capitalist revolution and of industrialization and prosperity and elimination of poverty than Britain did. And it was all, by the way, in Greyfriars Churchyard. You remember that? John Knox and the Church of the Covenant there, and you look there, and Falsloon Fudayi Spak Mas and Malug, and it's all the birthplace of Adam Smith, the revolution.
The grave of Adam Smith right there. We do a show every year, Arthur. In fact, I'm going to send you an invitation to this. Every summer, we do a show at Panmure House, which was Adam Smith's house in Edinburgh, where he died, where he lived with his mum. Poor old mum, poor him. I don't know, one of them was poor. For a long time, where he did the final editions of Wealth of Nations and Moral Sentiments. Every year during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, we do a show there, and we get on an economist, a comedian, politician every day.
I'll be both.
And you can be the whole lot. And we chit-chat. We try and recreate the feel of Adam Smith's salons, and we chat. It's great fun, and you're going to come. It's going to be great.
I'd love to, and we can have a little session there in Greyfriars Churchyard. We do sit down there with Jenny Geddes and the whole thing, and it's just so much fun. It's just so cool. I love it there. And we need to reconstitute the prosperity that Britain once had. And it's just such a wonderful country, and I just love being there. And if there's anything I can do to help you reestablish and recreate the prosperity and the elimination of poverty in the country, I'd be more than happy to do anything I can.
I'm hoping that this podcast may have made a start.
Let's hope so. Thank you, Merryn.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
My
Couldn't
pleasure.
appreciate it more.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Money. If you like our show, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep sending your questions or comments to merrynmoney@bloomberg.net. You can also follow me and John on Twitter or X. I'm at MerrynSW, and John is John_Stepek. This episode was hosted by me, Merryn Somerset Webb. It was produced by Summer Sadi and Moses Andam. Sound designed by Blake Maples and Robert Williams. And special thanks, of course, to Art Laffer, who I believe is also on X or Twitter. At Arthur Laffer, I think. So you can find him there. He may not know you can find him there, but I know you can find him there.